Good morning. My name is Sarah Dunnett and I'd like to thank Peter Llewellyn for inviting me to speak to you today with regard to the compliance management of pharmaceutical websites. As a pharmacist, I've worked within the pharmaceutical industry within medical affairs for about 20 years. 11 years I've actually been a medical signatory, so I've been really intimately involved in both the development of a lot of compliant materials and their approval, but also I've really seen us move into the digital space. Most recently, I've established a consultancy to really support and guide the pharmaceutical industry, service providers and indeed medical communications agencies with regard to compliance. I'm a firm believer that communications agencies who really understand, embrace and become experts in compliance both can benefit from operational efficiency because they can do things one time and get it right, but also they have a competitive advantage over those other agencies perhaps who don't quite get it right. So, website compliance. There are various guidebooks available to us, various rules that we can look at. What I'm going to do is to walk you through the key ones of those and also share some of the more recent code cases. 2017 has been quite active in this space. My objective is to recognise that there are many learnings for the medical communications network, and I'm a firm believer that by improving your awareness, your confidence and your competency in this area will mean that you can actually innovate and actually do some fantastic things that will advance patient care. So, going online. For some industries it's quite simple. However, for the pharmaceutical industry it's been riddled with challenges. I've tried to divide these up for you here to 4 core areas, taking each one in turn. From a technical perspective, it really is quite complex. We need whatever communication is going out there to be right on every platform, every time. We also need to consider the expectations, both from the commercial team, but also from actually the consumers, the healthcare professionals and indeed the patients who are going to be seeing this activity online. Obviously the commercial team, they want it to be impactful. They also want it to be quite efficient. They don't want to be spending a lot of time and they want to be able to build and develop. This is a digital tool. It should be something that can grow as more information becomes available or perhaps as strategy changes. From a healthcare professional perspective and patients, we need to be thinking about where they are. They want this all to work on their smartphones and they want it to be now and they want it to be current. They don't want a time lag with information coming out. But we're also somewhat thwarted by a lot of the activity that is there on the web. We all heard of Dr. Google and how expert he is in advising you on your medical treatments, but it's not always right. And should the pharmaceutical industry actually intervene and actually correct some of that? And do they have the capacity to do so? And in starting, are they really then taking on the accountability here? So lots of challenges for medical communications agencies to work with the pharmaceutical industry to really have a good online strategy. The place where we always need to start with compliance in the UK is the ABPI code for medicines. The Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry have been active here probably earlier than any other country. So it's really a go-to document. And what I've done here is divided up the clauses into their sort of key themes and topics. And it's really quite interesting to see how it's only clause 28 that is actually labelled for the internet. It's quite a short clause, only half a page, but it's incredibly impactful. And when I start to share with you some of the cases, you'll recognise that actually it's very sort of all of these other clauses do come into play, and it's relatively unusual that clause 28 actually is the breach that people suffer from. So, clause 28, I've summarised that for you on just a couple of slides here. It is quite short, but it's incredibly impactful. And it also is one of the key clauses that really cross-references through to the MHRA Blue Guide, which I'll talk about in a few moments. So, the first 3 subsections of that clause, What we can see here is how the first clause is really the catch-all. It really highlights that if you go online, you still need to comply with all of the other clauses. It also talks about the importance of really understanding and knowing your audience and making that really transparent on the website. In subclause 2, we understand which websites are actually in scope or out of scope for this ABPI code. And it's important to bear in mind that even if the site doesn't originate in the UK, if it actually starts to talk about UK products or talk about the availability or use in the UK, then it becomes in scope. Clause 3 is an interesting one because it actually cross-references back to an earlier clause talking about promotion of medicines to the public. That's particularly important because we all go online and we don't often differentiate between healthcare professionals and the public when we are looking around online, and we need to make sure that any website does do that segregation for us. And any content for the public absolutely still has to be factual, balanced, and we need to make sure that it doesn't encourage patients to actually ask for medicines, otherwise it would be regarded as promoting to the public. The next 3 subclauses are shown here. Subclause 4 talks to us about independent journals and how they can indeed include sort of healthcare professional style adverts on medicines. And it does really sort of talk to us about how prescribed medicines can be included online. Subclause 5 gives us a listing of the kind of core documents that are almost expected to be included on a pharmaceutical industry website, but it does stress that they need to be very much in a non-promotional style. One of the challenges, as you'll see as we talk about the cases, is making sure we have a balance between healthcare professional content and public content. Interestingly, in clause 5 here, we do see a cross-reference back to clinical studies specifically. It's important that any clinical studies that are underway within a pharmaceutical industry are published somewhere, and one of the vehicles could be the website. It doesn't have to be on the website, but that's certainly one of the mechanisms that can be used. And then the final subclause, clause 6, really stresses the importance of having clear website ownership. And as you transition between your website and that of other third parties, that there are very clear lines of responsibility and lines of ownership that any person who visits that website will understand. In the past, we've been concerned about our responsibility for the websites that we link to, and it can be hard sometimes to keep on top of all of those websites and make sure that all of them are compliant. However, sometimes we do recognise that we can't have that full responsibility, and that's been recognised in some notes on subclause 6. So that's clause 28 in summary. I do encourage you to read the full text so that you really get the full meaning and full understanding there. The MHRA Blue Guide is available to us and really summarises the law in this area. There have been a number of editions, most recently September 2014, and we do see a fair bit of crossover between what is published here and what we read in the ABPI guide. So I've listed them here. There's 3 main sections that we should refer to whenever we're doing any website activity: 5.10, 6.3 and 7.5. However, these must never be used in isolation. You still need to recognise what's written in the full document. I've bulleted here a number of the topics that we need to consider. So absolutely, you must never contravene the regulations, and of course there should never be any promotion of any prescription-only medicine or a POM to the public. And we've talked already about how different pages need to be clearly labelled for healthcare professionals or the public. But also the MHRA do give us scope to actually have sections which are specifically for patients as well. It's important always that there's a balance of content, so we need to have adequate and non-promotional content for the public. And also the MHRA Blue Guide does describe to us how we can manage both press releases and safety reporting. Safety reporting is particularly critical, as I will come on to shortly. The PMCPA digital guidance is also available to us. Round about 2010, the PMCPA and the pharmaceutical industry recognised how difficult it was to really get online and recognised that actually there was quite a delay and we were missing the opportunity. So there was a working group pulled together and there was a lot of consultation, and that led to the publication of the first digital guidance in 2012. And you can see here that it's been updated in 2016. Again, this stresses some common and core thoughts around making sure that the audience is clear, etc. Social media is introduced here, and we do learn through this guidance how social media and discussion forums are actually acceptable so long as they're very well managed and so long as we take the full responsibility around safety reporting. If Pharma indeed sponsors a site that perhaps it isn't their own, it's really, really important to have a very clear ownership, in which case responsibility and editorial control, or to have a really clearly defined and documented arm's length agreement in place. Otherwise, the pharmaceutical industry does remain responsible. It's also very important to recognise how any individual staff activities actually are taken as being the company's responsibility, and that includes any agency that has been engaged by that said company. So for example, yourselves as medical communications agencies, if you do something online which may not be quite compliant, then the pharmaceutical company that you're working with will take the accountability and the responsibility for that. So it's really important that you fully understand what the requirements are. Social media is a really interesting one. The pharmaceutical industry would love to engage with patients and doctors in this space, and indeed, to some extent, there is an expectation that they do so. However, there is a concern, and it's so important to do it right. As I've shown here, it is possible to listen, to actually broadcast, and also to engage in this space, but you really need to make sure that any safety signals are actually managed really carefully. Back in 2013, a subgroup of the ABPI actually came together, the Pharmacovigilance Expert Network Group, and they actually published a document all around going online and interacting with the social media space. Very, very important that that is managed very carefully, and this particular document is available to guide and steer on that. It emphasises the need for team training. It emphasises the need for working in a project mechanism, so whereby if you start looking, then you have a clear endpoint that you can have. The reason for this is, I know pharmacovigilance departments are concerned that if they do start looking for safety signals, it can potentially get unwieldy and complicated. And if there is a marketing initiative and a marketing project to listen to customers, to interact with customers, to support a product launch and get some signals through generally from a marketing and a sales perspective, it's really, really important that it doesn't become an unwieldy volume of work for a pharmacovigilance team to need to keep a track of. If the actual social media or the discussion forum is hosted by the pharmaceutical industry, they remain fully accountable for it, and there is an expectation they literally have a daily interaction and a check on there. However, if the actual website itself is from a third party totally unrelated to the company, it's possible to actually go and look and to do so for just a defined time. Do that as a one-off or do that as a month. Have a defined time when you're doing that. There is still an obligation to report any adverse events or product complaints that you happen to find, but you can actually stop looking at that website when your current need is over. So that guide there is really helpful and really encourages and supports the pharmaceutical industry and indeed supportive agencies to engage and to interact in social media. What I'm going to do now is to talk you through a range of code cases. There have been quite a few code cases in 2017 that talk about websites and the industry, and I'm going to actually just summarise those for you. As I bring up each case, you'll see there's a reference number attached to each. First of all, you get a 4-digit number. That's a unique reference number. You can type it into the PMCPA website, and that will actually cite you the full documents that you can read to get the full detail. You'll also then see the month and the year that the case was initially started. Some of them take quite a while. They can take 6 months to actually be resolved. Other ones may take just 1 or 2 months. So first of all here, this is an interesting one, Lincoln Medical. They're a distributor in the UK, and it came to light that they had on their website, they had the names and the indications for 2 medicines. Not a lot more other detail, but the reality was by combining both the name and the indication on a public forum, effectively that was promoting those 2 licensed medicines, prescription-only medicines, to the public. So they picked up some breaches. They picked up a 9.1 for not maintaining high standards. They picked up a 26.1 for promoting to the public and a 28.1 for their website activity generally. So it's really, really important to make sure that if you are going to include information on the website with products and indications, that you do also make sure that it's very clearly labelled what is for healthcare professionals, what is for public, or else you do run the risk of falling into this trap of promoting to the public. Another couple of cases here, quite interesting. Both Grunenthal and Astellas really felt the pain of these ones. As you read them through, you see the similarities. Both organisations had engaged medical communications agencies and production companies to develop some videos. Those videos were absolutely fine in the context that they were initially intended. And for both of them, both of the companies were quite happy and content and everything was going well. The challenge came when, in both instances, actually somebody within the agency or the production company, or indeed one of the actors in the video, chose to actually publish it online in an open environment. So there were a couple that went to YouTube and another that went through to Vimeo. Because they are open access, effectively they were promoting medicines to the public, and so therefore the pharmaceutical companies picked up some breaches. Even though there was documentation between the pharmaceutical company and the agency that they shouldn't do this, the fact that it happened meant that the pharmaceutical company was in breach. The challenge here is that the agencies never get named. It's the pharmaceutical companies who really feel the pain here. And as you can imagine, that really compromises the relationship that there is between the pharmaceutical company and that agency. And when they're looking to do work again and again, maybe they might think about, can we trust this company? Can we trust all of their employees to work for us responsibly? Should we look further afield? Should we change? So these ones here demonstrate the importance of the medical communications community really understanding compliance and recognising the responsibilities that they have. Another couple of cases here that follow on from a press release. Very interesting. 2 approved press releases. The first one was with regard to a new development for a medicine for multiple sclerosis, quite an emotive case. A responsible press release was published. Unfortunately, the media got hold of that, extrapolated that, and created all sorts of issues and false promises. The second one involved an employee picking up a press release from their company and just doing a very simple tweet. In practice, the first one, Roche, and they weren't called in breach. And the reason being is that they had no control or scope with what media were doing. So they weren't responsible. However, in the second one, albeit back in 2011, you can see here from the reference number, actually that did lead to a breach because it was an employee who took an action that was inappropriate. So it's really important as you think about a press release being approved that actually it's approved in that form and it's not actually extrapolated on. And then here, just some other couple of cases. The first one's quite complicated, a website that had lots of different things on it. And when the PMCPA looked into that and they looked into the complainants' views of that, there were actually a number of challenges. A video that had exaggerated claims on it, lack of clarity on a booklet that had been published online. We can also see that a video wasn't recertified in time within the 2-year time window. And also the second one there, Sterling Anglian, they still had a product that was labelled as new more than 2 years after it had actually been launched and available. And as we know, the routine is that you can only use the term new for 12 months. So highlighting here the importance of really keeping attention to detail, making sure that it's transparent, making sure things are clear on the website. Otherwise, you do run the risk of a range of breaches. This is a lovely example I'm sharing. You know, I've probably scared you a little bit with some of these other cases, and you know, it's a place where you fear to go. However, this case from Pfizer illustrates really truly what can be done. Yes, this had a small breach attached to it. Initially, they started saying it was the ultimate stop smoking roadshow for 2017. A complainant and indeed the PMCPA took exception to the word ultimate because they didn't feel that it was really emphasising and recognising and respecting the professional standing of healthcare professionals. But simply by removing the word ultimate meant that this actually is now a viable and professional resource, and it's an amazingly comprehensive resource as well. You can see there are CPD modules, there are videos, there are reference papers, etc. It's very comprehensive, and it just highlights what can be achieved. And so really, to summarise, I really wanted to stress to you how by using the rule books that we have and by really getting to understand the published cases, it is important that we do enhance our knowledge and we can achieve great things. We do need to consider from a macro perspective, we need to look at the balance of these websites and make sure that actually we're being professional in that balance and making sure that there is separate material for the public and for patients and for healthcare professionals. And we do need to also look down into the detail and make sure that, yes, absolutely our choice of words is correct and making sure that our certifications are on time and so on. But ultimately, if we do have robust procedures in place, then it's amazing what we can achieve. So with care, absolutely we can be innovative in this digital space. I've just listed some examples there of the things that have been achieved, can be achieved. Who knows what will be achieved into the future. So, should you wish to explore further on this topic, please do contact me and we can discuss. This is an area that I'm quite passionate about. I'm very keen to make sure that compliance actually liberates and helps the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm available to chat through on consultancy basis, also to help with signatory projects, or indeed if there are bespoke training issues where I can assist. So there's my contact details. Please do feel free to reach out. Thank you.